Welcome to Bullies, Wimps, and Poverty Pimps, a bi-weekly podcast with me, Dr. Kish Cumi Price. Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Bullies, Wimps, and Poverty Pimps. I am Dr. Kish Cumi Price, and if you have been following us for a minute, you know that we've been started off talking about bullies, and then went into a series on poverty pimps. And now we're going to transition to wimps. And I would love for you all to get a better understanding of wimps in the way in which I'm going to be using the term, not in the traditional sense of a derogatory, I don't know, label placed on those that are subjected to bullying. This is about people who do not use their power or do not understand how to use their power, um, decide to make selfish choices to protect self as opposed to helping to protect others, right? And so that's where we're going to start. And I'd like to start with a personal story because if you have been following along, I referenced in a previous episode that at one point in time, I saw myself in that role as a right. And to give context to that, it is in the sense that I was subjected to treatment that I felt like I should have been more vocal about. I should have spoke up about it because not only was it something that I had experienced, but I had also witnessed the same kind of treatment happening to other people, right? That I was, in my way, I think, responding to it um, in a safe way, if that makes any sense. So, doing it in a way to protect myself while also trying to stand up for the other people that I felt like were on the receiving end of just bad treatment in the workplace, right? And so, when it came my way, I, of course, knew what it was and called it out. Didn't change anything, right? It still was an element that created a really bad environment. And so much so that it resulted in me parting ways from that organization. And when that happens, and that's kind of, I think it just depends on the organization, it depends on the relationship, depends on circumstances. But for me, in this particular situation, I was offered uh, a non disclosure agreement. I was offered a severance agreement that had a non disclosure agreement attached to it. And I think I was so surprised by the notion that I was being subjected to this kind of mistreatment in the workplace that I folded. I felt like I needed to be in a place of uh, what I would call submitting to the bullying, if you will, because I felt the weight of pressure from my family, and not really knowing what was next or what I needed to do. And I also was in a very, I guess I'll say, vulnerable time in my life as well, because I was pregnant. And so, yes, and I know if you're listening to this, you're probably thinking, wow, a lot, a lot of things, right? There's so much that could be attached to that if you knew specifics. But that's not the point of me telling the story. The point of me telling the story is that I absolutely could have, in that period of time, decided, no, I'm not going to be subjected to this kind of treatment. I am not going to sign this severance agreement. I'm not going to sign this non disclosure agreement. I'm going to be in a place where I can own my story. I can share whatever I want to share. And in so doing, that was a way for me to at least have some peace about the situation. What ended up happening, as I did fold into the wimp tendencies, if you will, of not speaking up for myself, even, um, was that I just had this unrest, this uneasiness, like it just felt nasty, right? Because yeah, I needed to take care of her family. I needed to make sure that we were good, but I also felt like this isn't right. Like this is not right, and I need to say something. But it felt like it was, like I said, it was about me at the time, and I felt like, okay, you know what? I'm a big girl. I can deal with this. It is what it is. These people are who they are. This is how they operate, and they're going to do them, and I have to do me, and I have to move on. What I didn't take into account at the time that I think I should have was, is if there's something about how I'm in this situation that is going to result in someone else having to be subjected to the same kind of treatment, and not exposing this in a way actually paves the path for continued mistreatment at the hands of what some would think is just like, oh, this is ironic. Like, why is it that there's so many, instances in which this particular thing is occurring, or this rhythm has developed, right? Where it's like employees come in and it doesn't work out, they have to go, and no, there's a shift. We change the organizational structure. We do this. We do like, and nobody really pinpoints the culprit. Like, why is this happening? And so, yes, that all of that plagued me for so long, to the point where I was just like, okay, all right, God, I don't know what you want me to do with this. It is what it is at this point. I'm, better for it. Turn my bitter into better and move on, and remember to always stand your ground, speak up, uh, even when it's uncomfortable and when it does require you to place yourself in jeopardy and in harm's way. And I will go back to that same situation and say that's pretty much why I ended up in the situation, because I was vocal, I was sharing my concerns, I was speaking up. What I'm saying is, I feel like to carry that through, I should have continued when I became the subject of that uh, abuse. I should have made that public. I should have done something in a way that actually helped to change the narrative. And, nobody wants to be the squeaky wheel. Nobody wants to be the alarm. So let me caution you by saying this. The goal is not to be that, right? It's not to cause a stir and what, no. Try to handle these things internally, try to get to a place where better is the goal, right? That's always the point. It's not to make a spectacle, it's to go to it. No, and I'm not that kind of person anyway. I think if you are listening to this, you probably don't. You, you question me saying that because you're like, oh, well, you're doing a podcast. Okay, what? No, this is even outside of my normal comfort zone. Like, I'm more about changing things and the scenes, just getting things done. But what I've been called to do in this period, in this season of my life, is to bring these things to the forefront, because I realize that there are other people like me that have been doing things in the shadows, in the background, and not necessarily wanting a spotlight. Um, just to want things to be better, do better, right? We can be better. We can. And I just feel called in this season of my life to bring these things forward so that we can be more intentional, so that we can all call ourselves out, more accountable for how we treat each other, how we are doing this life with each other, right? So, anyway, I know that there were several episodes for the bully section and for poverty. And I say wimps for less because they, at some point, we all have the ability to slip into this category of self-preservation or protection. And it is one of the most challenging calls is to call your own self out, right? To recognize, well, where have I been a wimp? Where am I currently being a wimp? Where may I in the future be a wimp? And having a plan for that so that you stand your ground and that you don't end up in a place where you're regretting not speaking up, not standing firm and being a beacon of light. And so I will say that a huge portion of that is is difficult to call your own self out on things, right? But it's also a practice that I think we need to develop a muscle that we need to develop together because here's the thing. You may not see yourself as an advocate. You may not see yourself as, some of these the people I've been talking to as we've been on this journey are charged with being advocates for people, right? They are called to yeah, be the voice, right, for the voiceless. But then there are people who are like, that's not my role. I don't, I just show up, I do my work, I volunteer, I would, whatever. And maybe your work is even in, not necessarily front facing. I think about the season of time I was a full time stay at home mom. Okay, you're not seeing me out. You might not even know my name, but I still have power. Like each person has power, whether you are in a traditional workplace or not. You have power, you have work, you have purpose. And what I'm saying to you is, how are you showing up in those spaces? How are you showing up in the grocery store or at the post office or at an event? And if you witness that you feel called to stand out for or stand up for and you don't do it, you gotta live with it. You know what I mean? Like, so I'm really speaking to listening to that inner voice, right? Listening when that God voice is asking you, welcoming you to be bold, to be courageous, right? To actually stand up for or stand in the gap for. And how do you, whether that's for yourself, whether it's for your children, family members, friends, strangers, how do you respond? And so, for me, I think I've naturally been gifted with the desire to advocate, right, for people. So much so that sometimes I forget to do it for myself, right? And so that may be something that you struggle with. It's like you're bold and courageous for everybody else, but you're a wimp when it comes to standing up for you. And that's something to work on as well. So as we prepare for this series on wimps, I'm asking you to be transparent, be authentic, be vulnerable with yourself so that you can understand how do you show up or how don't you show up, right? Uh, because it matters. And eventually you will be in a place where you're questioning what you did, why you did it, why you didn't do it, what you said, what you didn't say, what you could have said. And for me, I think everybody has a different belief system that they operate by. For me, I identify as a Christian, so I do believe in life. I do believe in life, and I do believe that we all are being held accountable for what we do, right? That we have a principle of sowing and reaping what you sow. I believe that we all held accountable and will have to stand before God for what we do while we're walking this earth. And because of that, I feel like, what I'm saying matters more than what it may appear or seem to, probably, they're like, what are you talking about? And why is it important? Like, because it does matter. I do believe, whether you believe what I believe, I uh, it doesn't matter if it's real. Like if I'm right, it doesn't matter because you will be held accountable for those things. So it's kind of like, I guess, my invitation to you is if I'm wrong, I'm wrong. If I'm right, then great. Glad you listened. I'm glad you took this to heart. And if I'm wrong, then I'm also glad you listened, took this to heart. You actually probably ended up living a better life here on earth than you imagine. If you do come to this, and I'm just saying. I think people have their different beliefs. My point is, regardless, we should all strive to be better humans while we're living. And in so doing, that does mean that you're not just out for self. You're not just looking out for your boards. You are standing in the gap for those who need you and uh, being a voice and using your power where you can. Okay? So for me, that means that as we're on this journey, we are going to be talking about ways that we can identify when we are being wimps. We can identify when we are seeing wimp tendencies in others and how to pull them out of that place. That we can have systems in place to prevent the infiltration of wimps in a space, right? Where it's the Bible picture where everybody is just agreeing. It's kind of that peer pressure on steroids where it becomes a group norm. Well, it seems like everybody was for this, so I just agreed for it. It seems like this is what people wanted, so I didn't say anything. I didn't speak up, even though it was very clear to me that it wasn't right. That's what I'm talking about. When we talk about the hatred, the, the sinister ways in which people have moved about this earth before us, while we're here, even after us, it all has to do with the ability to do so. That there was no resistance or little resistance, that people were on board with something that was completely and utterly atrocious behavior that was condoned because people didn't speak up. They felt like they didn't have the authority, they didn't have the ability, they didn't have the capacity, it didn't matter enough to them because they weren't the ones that were on the other side of the mistreatment, right? That's what we're really talking about. I know the example that I gave was the context was within work, but this is a thing that matters across the board. And so I hope that as we are in the space of evaluating where we are, what we're doing, how we're doing it, that we're intentional about calling this out within ourselves and calling this out within our peers and those that we see, that are keeping ad systems in place because nobody wants to call it out. Call for a vote, everybody says they agree. They don't even know what they're agreeing to, right? Like, that's what I mean when I say, like, this witness is something that is very much part of our culture worldwide, global lives everywhere. It's almost like that's the default is to be with, is to be more self-consumed, concerned about your own self and those closest to you, and not really willing to stand up for everybody else or to call anything else out if it doesn't affect you. That is completely a thing that a very demonic way of thinking about things. But it's a lie, right? Because you think that it doesn't apply to you, but it absolutely does, right? We're all connected. And if you don't understand how all of these things work, I mean, I'll give just an example that probably our listeners here in the States, across the globe to the other countries that are listening, it applies. So here's the example. Let's say you live in an area that seems to be primarily safe to your standards. Um, and you think that you and your family are safe because of where you live. And then it's a really obvious problem where people are getting basic needs and so you know, time where you live, right? If they're not getting I can talk about this one because I was in Michigan where this crisis actually happened, uh, where there was not clean water available, to people, right? And you can say, well, that doesn't affect me. I don't care. Well, what if it then becomes your problem, where either your water source is tampered with, or now the people who have that, who don't have access to clean water, are now trying to come to where you are so that they can get access to clean water. Or what you get what I'm saying? Like this is a it was kind of a loose example, but I'm trying to show where there is connection. There's always a way that it leads to us needing to care. Like whether it's directly impacting you or not, we are all connected. If anything happens in any of our worlds where economically there's a downturn and people don't have the resources that get access to food, shelter, proper shelter, the basic needs of life, then now it doesn't hurt everyone, right? Because you may be paid better, but now people are going to eat what you have. And so you don't care enough now where things are a little more civil and you can actually respond to needs in a healthy way, in a way that you can process things and make educated decisions. Before you make decisions in a very emergency state, right? Like I don't know if we understand what happens when we deny people uh, attention and assume that because we're not directly affected, that it won't affect us. It does, which is why you should always be in a place of trying to make sure that people are good. You know, where you stand, if you can make a difference, do that, right? If you can say something, say it. If you can do something, do it. That's where we're at. And so I know this is just an introduction to this series, but we really are to get to calling out how we see this recognition and definitely in the workspace, right? Definitely in this conference, the secret things that where people just don't feel like it's worthy of that spend calling it out, or supporting someone who's old enough to call something out. Some people don't even have the courage to do that. You weren't even the person who wanted the voice. Like it takes a lot for somebody to actually go against the current, go against the grain, and say, "Hey, we might want to consider this." You're not even that person. Some people are even tripping off of supporting what they know to be right, even if it's still considered a minority thought, right? Like that thought is in the minority in this world. Even though I believe in it, I'm supporting it because I don't want to be seen as not being of them, right? Like I don't want to be and that. Well, that's a wimp, and wimps are going to be held accountable for their inactivity, right? What are the things that they didn't do, things they didn't say, the things that we didn't do, the things that we didn't say, right? So I hope that this resonates with you, that you'll tune in for our next episode where we will begin to share some of the ways in which this presents itself, what you can do, whether it is you are the one or you are witnessing this kind of uh, behavior, or you're hesitant to address it, or you don't really know how to get out of it. Maybe you've shown up this way for so long, you don't know what to do. And maybe you have this whole person at home that's tired of being a witness. I even talk about help people pull out so that they can be more courageous, right? So they can stand with you and be more supportive of what's right, support what's right. that's what we're going to do this episode. So thank you for joining me. I hope that you got something out of today. And I'm going to close out sometimes like something that I think is inspirational from my own personal reading collections. And sometimes I won't share, but this time I have something. So I'll share this proverb. And there's only simpletons believe everything they're told. The prudent carefully consider their steps. That's Proverbs 14:15. And just to kind of leave you with that thought of only simpletons believe everything they're told. The prudent carefully consider their steps. Everything that I've been saying since we started is asking questions, right? If you're constantly in a place where you just take what you're told and that's what it is, you are set up to deal, right? That you're training to be a what? Because you don't want to press, you don't want to ask questions, you don't want to receive more knowledge about anything. It's just okay. Well, that's what they said. I guess it's true. You like are cool with being a wimp if that's where you stand. And I'm asking you, I'm challenging you to step away from that because that's where if you don't even see yourself this way, like you probably think it's unlikely being a wimp. It is absolutely one of the most poisonous in which we are playing a part in what we also are trusted because you don't think that you have power. You don't think that you have influence and you don't think that it's your place to say something or do something. That's why this is so important. The other uh, wisdom nugget I want to leave here is simpletons are clothed with foolishness, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. Simpletons are clothed with foolishness, but the prudent are crowned with knowledge. And that's directly following the same chapter of Proverbs 14, but that's verse 18. And if we really look at this entire series is called Wimpletons, right? This is a merging of simpletons. It's that why are simpletons clothed with foolishness? Well, we just talked about the verse before where it said simpletons believe everything they're told. Well, that's what they call with foolishness. Because you're just believing everything you're told, and so you don't have the knowledge. And then it says the prudent are crowned with knowledge. So this challenge is going to be how not to be a wimp, right? How to be knowledgeable, how to be bold, right? You can be bold with knowledge. It's not really a good look to try to be bold with foolishness, right? Because you don't even know what's really going on. But when you have the knowledge, you can be bold because you know what you know. All right. So thank you for joining. And once again, charge is there. Be bold, be courageous, be independent. And please share this uh, series, podcast in general with others that you think will benefit. I'm hearing more and more from people uh, personally, right, that it's helping them. And I hope that we can help others. So if you feel inclined to share, please do. And if not, just keep getting the nuggets for yourself and hopefully it'll show up in your life somewhere where you will really look back on it. I'm glad that I'm different, glad that I feel affirmed in who I am, right? So that's where we're at. Be bold, be courageous,